Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If we were watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about RealityScan. RealityScan is from Epic, and it's a free application that you can get for your iPhone and maybe Android. I don't know. I'm not sure. But it's available now for everyone. I've been testing it for the last 6 months, and so I'll show people around a little bit and answer your questions about what it does and why it's important. And so stay tuned for that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Our first in from Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. Ari asks, what is a good way to get an XLR microphone into a camera with a 3.5 millimeter jack like the Sony A7 IV, especially if phantom power is required?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's a couple different hardware devices. The Saramonic is the one that a lot of people use. I also am a big fan of IK Multimedia. I couldn't find the one that I wanted to show off, but this is the iRig Pro, which does a double XLR. But there is an iRig HD, which I'll put into Makana there. And basically what it is a single XLR that you can run phantom power. And on the other end is a 3.5 millimeter jack that you can plug right into a DSLR camera, anything like that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
The company that's been doing this for many, many years is called Beach Tech. They have a whole variety of products. This one, the little Audio Marvel for like $189. They go all the way up to, they're designed specifically for doing this, connecting DSLRs with phantom power and XLR microphones. They have some that go all the way up to $600 or $700. So you can check it out on their website. They have a lot of solutions for doing just that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you folks know that I'm a big fanboy of Sony products, but I will say that I never, ever, ever used the 3.5-inch plug on my Sony cameras because the preamp and the audio is noisy. The best way to do that with a Sony camera is to buy a Sony interface that goes into one of the hot shoes on top of the camera, the M1 or the digital interface. If you just want XLRs, the XLR K3M XLR works a treat. And or if you've got an M1, which I do, my little Sony ZV-E10, that noise is me picking up. This little device has a shotgun on it, and it also has XLR connectors on it. And what it does is that it provides you with a digital connection to the camera as opposed to using the analog 3.5. No noise, sounds great. I have it on my FX3 also, highly suggested. The only problem with this ECM is that the M1 adapter is a little squirrely. It tends to be wiggle a wee bit too much. If you drop the camera, you're going to break it. I did that.
Yeah, and I suddenly realized I could probably show it to you, but now I'm running around trying to figure this out. So I was going to show something in the future. But the one that I use, of course, is the MixPre 3. The MixPre 3 has a quarter 20 on the top, so you don't really notice it from the way we use this. But the quarter 20 is sitting on the top of the MixPre, and I'm going to try to show it to you here real quick. Let's see if my camera's showing up. Maybe not. No, it's not showing up. All right. So anyway, so the MixPre has it. One of the things that you'll notice is that it's flush. It's right across the top. There is actually an Allen wrench that you stick up into the bottom of the MixPre, and you can turn that quarter 20 into your camera so that you can attach the MixPre to the camera, and then you can attach the camera to the tripod, and so that's going to put that MixPre right under it, like you would with a Beach Tech, except now you have 32-bit float and really good preamps, and then you're just using the 1/8 inch at that point into the camera as a reference, just so you know what happened there, but you're not actually going to use those records, or I wouldn't. So Zoom has less expensive versions of that as well. But if you're asking for a good or the best way to do it, I think probably the MixPre is probably the best way to get 3.5 into a camera. Next question.
And next question in from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. What service, United States Postal Service, I'm trying to say, FedEx, et cetera, and process, insurance, et cetera, do you use to ship your remote kits to talent within the continental United States? For reference, kits include Insta360, Shure MV7, Mac Mini cables, and Aperture tube lights.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
When we were shipping kits across the United States, I was using FedEx, mostly because of the fact that it was you could get a package on a Saturday or a Sunday if needed. I suppose UPS would have been my backup, but FedEx has always been that way. And of course, you can always put insurance on each package as you go.
Yeah, and the FedEx is definitely the way we've done it in the past, and it gives us a lot of options between I want it first time overnight to freight, and so if you can get ahead of it, it's not that expensive to send that whole kit there. I will say that we started with cardboard boxes, and then we went to Pelicans because we thought it'd be more rugged and it would be repeatable. And we went back to cardboard boxes, and the reason we went back to cardboard boxes was specifically because it is cheaper to ship. So we were paying almost the price on a fast turn. We were paying almost the price of the Pelican case every single time we sent it. So we started doing the math and have moved back towards doing these with cardboard boxes, and we buy new ones each time. So we're not reusing those cardboard boxes. We send them out, and what we do is and right now most of the small kits that we're doing for the Michael Krasny show, for instance, are much smaller. But even for the larger kits, we're going to be using the cardboard boxes, and we send it with its own tape. So the tape you can peel off and put it back on. We send it with its own return label. So it's all it's got a return label. It's got its own tape to go back. It's got instructions on how to make that happen, and then it's all well packed and clearly packed on how it needs to go, to return to us. And it just has turned out to be. It's the savings are significant, and it was actually we were inspired by that because we had a guest on here they do rentals of kits, and they show these really cool ones. What we want to do is actually start branding those boxes, but we haven't got enough flow to make that work yet. But we might get stickers and put them on the outside. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Would it be fair to say that the harder you're making for them to repack it and send it to you, the less likely you're going to get your stuff back? Okay.
100%. Like you have to hand, so the big thing is that there are, the clearer you make the box to return, the better chance you're going to get it back. And a lot of times we're making calculations on a certain amount of loss, in the smaller kits. On the bigger kits, we never lose them. Because the bigger kits, because a lot of times what we do in the bigger kits is we FedEx it to somebody, and then we have them deliver it to the person and pick it up from the person. Because it's like 3 1650s for the one that has a 6K camera and a mini, it's got this 6K camera and a mini and a USB and an ATEM and a whole bunch of other things to it. Those ones we have somebody hand deliver those to the person. But when we're mailing them out, we're really, really careful about we used to do this for Pixel Core. We did hundreds of these, and what we learned was we could get our loss rate started out at about like 60%. We weren't getting back, and they weren't nearly as big as these kits. These were a mic and a light and an earpiece. That was about it. But we were only getting 40% of them back. We got that up to well over 90%, and that was just from packaging it in a way that wasn't tight. Like the temptation is to make it as tight as you can, but we packaged it in a way that it was open and easy for them to take it out. It was easy for them to open it. It said open here. Like, you just interfaces. I mean, I've become obsessed with interface, and interface is everything. And in this case, them being able to clearly open it and then be able to know, like having impressions where all the things need to be so that they understand, even if you can take the pick and pluck out of a 1650 and put it into a cardboard box so that everything has like a little thing that they know where to put it. So if they know where to put it back, and if they have you'd be surprised at how many people didn't send something back because we didn't send them tape. They just didn't have any tape for the box, and it just sat there forever of them, I'm going to get around to it. Because this is someone who just came for a show for an hour. Like, why are we making them do all this work? So we put the tape in, and what you want to get is there's fiber tape that peels off the back. So you don't have to get it wet. You don't have to figure it out. It's only one piece. You just peel the two pieces off. Or at FedEx, we just grab one of those little rollers, the little rollers with the little thing, and we just pack it in there. Then they just pull it across, and then it's done. It costs $3, and so we just put that in there, and we're going to make that part of the case. So that can be done either way. And then printing out that return slip so they don't have to figure out how to return FedEx or anything else. So all they have to do is go to a FedEx and drop it off. Or in some cases, we literally send somebody to their house to grab it because it's just they're like, oh, I don't have time for this. Because if you're doing VIPs, they'll be like, I don't have time to go to FedEx. And so we pay someone $50 to go over there and pick it up and take it back. So those are all the different options. But what we found is that if we called them the day after the event and asked them to put it in the mail, and then a week after the event and asked them to put it in the mail, and then a month after that and asked them to put it in the mail, we would get it back. And we had literally the team that was managing the boxes, they just had a tickler system that would just be like, we haven't gotten this box yet. Just call them back. And you'd be really nice about it. Hey, we're just wondering if you were able to get that box in there. And again, we made calculations on the rentals. Back in PixelCore, we made calculations on the rentals on how many we'd lose. So we were giving them to the client for less than it would cost to buy it. Obviously, you want to do that, considerably less. But we would account for the fact that we weren't going to get them all back, and that they would break things. Break things was a bigger problem. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree on everything, especially the packing part, because the first thing when they open up that box, I want them to see the instructions on how to set up whatever it is. So I'm curious on that cardboard thing because I was thinking of actually, to lighten the load, actually using regular luggage. But my question to you is, how do you get past if it's a heavy thing? Because Pelican cases usually have wheels, and a cardboard box wouldn't.
They're just not, the bigger cases we're still sending in Pelican cases. So the big ones with the 6Ks and the teleprompters and the tripods and everything else, those are going out in Pelican cases because there's, to your point, you need but the problem is the Pelican case exacerbates it to some degree. Like people getting the 1650 case up. We had someone this poor woman that we sent it to, was not a weightlifter, not real big, and she had 3 Pelican cases that had to go up three flights of stairs, and she was super not excited about the kit after she got it up there. so we, in the future, after that, she was the one person that had us go, well, we should send somebody to help, get it up. And during COVID, we couldn't do that. We could drop it off on the outside and they had to pull it up. But as COVID faded away, as far as a production concern, for the bigger kits, we usually want to send somebody there to help them set it up. And to make sure that it gets done. And it's just a lot easier. Like, just let us, and then people who don't want people to come into their house, and we have actors that they won't even give you the address. So you have to send it to their assistant or send it to a PO box, and then their assistant's going to pick it up and then put it together. And to your point, instructions are everything. Like we have the way we've done it is we have a PDF that tells you how to put it together. We have a little movie that's hidden on YouTube that we send you a link. Here's a link on how to put together the kit. And it's, it's all edited really quickly together. Or not edited quickly, but it's a very fast, sped up. It's like 2 minutes of you can see how someone does it, because we found the PDF people would get lost. And then finally for the bigger kits, we get on, even though they've had all of that, we tell them to go ahead and give it a shot, but then we get on a Zoom with them and literally build it with them, to help them put it together for the bigger ones. The smaller ones, no one has trouble putting them together. Like, it's just the big ones that turns out that the interface, and I haven't fixed this yet, the interface to the tripod, to the Benro tripods for the teleprompter is hard. Like, it doesn't fit. It fits really tightly, and everyone gets caught on that one thing. Everything else is fine. And so I've been buying these tripod heads that will snap in. You just set it down and it just snaps in, but none of them will hold the weight of the snap-in ones that are just automatic. You just drop them in and they just snap on without any sliding forward or back. Can't handle the weight of the tripod and the camera. so it's a conundrum. I may end up just machining something, so we'll see how that goes. Next question.
Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada, has a question. Is anyone looking for a more powerful Raspberry? A new device called CoolPi, Mini HDMI 2.1, plus Mini DisplayPort 8-core CPU. And there's a link there to Tom's hardware for finding it.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I scanned the specs. The specs look fine on this thing. The problem is you don't have the same development community that you have with the Raspberry Pi around this thing yet.
Is it a different language?
You can run Android on it, or you can run Linux on it. So, but it doesn't have it's using different chips. So you're not going to have the same development community.
Huh. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be problematic. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there are a number of these higher level Raspberry Pi, not really emulators, but wannabes, a more expensive version of the Pi. But like John said, they're not necessarily the same chip, and so they don't have the same environment around them. There is, if you're looking for Raspberry Pi 4s, I found a website called Pi Locator, or our Pi Locator, and it has all these different Raspberry Pis, where to locate them, and links to where you can get them and the prices in euros.
Do we know
American.
Do we know what part of the Pi is making it so hard to get? Is there a certain chip that is like, we just don't know? We don't know.
I don't think they've ever disclosed that.
Yeah, I think also that because of its price, it's $35 price, and nobody else has been able to match that price for what you're getting. All these others that have come out are $125, something like that. So they're 4 to 5 times as expensive as the Pis.
But the Pis right now are really hard to get at that price, right? I mean,
right, because they sold them all out because they were so cheap, and they only manufacture them a couple of times a year, I think, and because of shipping problems too, and because of the pandemic,
Right.
And maybe because they're coming out of a factory in Taiwan or something. I don't know. They were produced in Europe, but I'm not sure where they're actually being made.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I've been blown away recently along these lines with ZimaBoard, zimaboard.com. Really, really powerful thing. And, if you're going to go away from 100 and something, about $100.
And these are in Windows, right, as well as Linux.
It's Windows, Linux. Let me see, OpenWRT, pfSense, and Android. So basically anything you want to throw at it.
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm on the lookout because I've been trying to build a bespoke Playout B device. It's all pre-contained, even with a touchscreen on the top of it, because I think it would be cool to do it that way and just have it as a hyperdeck, essentially. So I've been looking and looking and looking. So I'll check this thing out. But I'd love it if there was an image built for it for Linux.
Yeah, I have to admit, I got my Raspberry my 4 all set up for. I was putting my kit together, and I got it all set up to do Playout B, and I had it all working and tied in. And then my son just started First Robotics, and he's learning how to program. And he's like, "Do you have any Raspberry Pis?" And I was like, "Here you go." Because I don't know where to get another one for the price, so I handed it to him. So now I got to get into something else. Go ahead, Courtney.
Another thing I wanted to mention is if you're looking for alternatives to Raspberry Pi, there's a good site on YouTube called Explaining Computers. A little bit eccentric guy called Christopher Barnett, and he reviews all of those Raspberry Pi lookalikes and feel-alikes, unboxes them and tests them. So that's a good place to start for looking for alternatives to Pi.
And that's sorry, you can hear me jumping into YouTube while I'm trying to find. You said explaining.
Explainingcomputers.com. I think.
I just went to the YouTube, and
he has a YouTube channel. Yeah.
And 887,000 people have found it before me.
Yes,
very good.
He's a bit eccentric, but he's a funny guy.
Sounds good. Sounds like my kind of guy. Next question.
From Richard Lavery in Belfast, we've got a partially transferred ProRes file. The transfer failed close to the end that we cannot open. Is there a way to open it to retrieve data even if transfer was incomplete? The file is 800 gigabytes large, 90% of the transfer.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, there are ways, but it's probably more expensive than transferring it again. It's a lot of work, and depends on what file system you were transferring it into and what it was being written to, and how populated that disk was when it was writing to it, because it may be scattered in sectors all over the disk. So recovery might be difficult without expending a lot of time and money, and probably be cheaper just to transfer it again.
And go ahead, Serge.
I understood the question differently. I thought the question was more to transfer from one side to another side. If it's the case, and you have one good copy of it, use a software that will be able to check at the block level and do a sync. Like Lucid Link would be a nice solution, I think, to be able to put the file there, and the recipient end will not download the part that they already have. They would just check which part needs to be re-downloaded.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the best bet is always transfer with a sum check so that it makes sure that what it was copying got everything, and if it didn't, whether or not it can actually repair that data fork that got hosed somehow in the transfer process.
Yeah, it is. We have tried to recover ProRes files in the past, and it has worked at times. The one that we've been able to recover with specialized software is a Key Pro. This is why we don't have Key Pros anymore. The Key Pro, if you pulled it out without closing the deck, so the deck has a close button and then an eject button, and you had to close the deck and then pull it out. And if you pulled it out before that, it would you could see the data was there, but you couldn't get to it. And so we learned to there's a piece of software that will recover that because it's the whole file's there. But if the whole file's not there, the only reason I would recover that is if someone doesn't have the other side of that file. I would not make any other attempt. The amount of time it will take to fix it will be astronomical in cost compared to just having them retransfer it. Even put it on FedEx. It would be better than what you're talking about. The chances of you getting even the 80% or 90% that's there is pretty low. Next question.
From Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. Dan asked, AMC Theaters announced in 2023 you'll be able to book a theater for a Zoom room meeting. What would those theaters need with mics and cameras to be successful?
Good, Courtney.
Well, I haven't seen one yet. I've heard. I saw this article when it came out, but I figured they would just put in a couple of PTZ cameras at the front of the auditorium, looking back, and use their big screen and with a computer. Of course, they have computers in all the projection booths of those theaters to do the DTS and do the other play out the commercials and stuff, the pre-roll stuff. So they just put Zoom up on that, feed a couple of PTZs in, and get 3 or 4 handheld wireless mics to handle the questions from the crowd, I guess.
Yeah, good, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. It's going to be the dreaded hybrid event. You're going to have people line up to react with what's going on the screen. And it sort of takes away from the whole experience. Things will be rolling along really well, and then somebody comes up to the microphone and starts speaking slowly or confusedly, or maybe they're just plain nervous, and it doesn't work well for the whole experience.
Yeah, we've done a lot of these, and not necessarily to AMC's theaters, but to venues, venue to venue. And, for an ongoing thing, I agree with Mitchell that I probably wouldn't open the mics very often if I didn't have to. Not so much from a technical perspective, but from a creative perspective. Listening to average people ask questions is, it's painful, and so there are times though when you want to have that one-on-one interaction, you want to have a discussion with that person. And sometimes it's another content expert. We've done ones where a content expert stands up on the other side and they're having, a thoughtful discussion with the speaker. And that actually works pretty well. And so you got to figure out how to make that work. Now, most of the stuff we've done in the past has not been with Zoom. It's been with, we have done some with Zoom in theaters, but mostly it's been Google Hangouts. And so you'd think that you'd want to put the camera under the screen, but that looks really weird. So what you want to do is put the camera above the screen. And then what you do is you put the person speaking, when you're putting them where people should look, you kind of edge it a little bit higher on the screen. And what'll happen is that people will, they'll look up, and their eye contact, their eye to eye will actually not be too bad, as it looks there. Now, if you have a speaker that's coming in that's not at a theater, then you actually want to go the opposite direction. You want the speaker don't want to give them in Teratron. You want to put a monitor underneath the camera. That way they're looking a little under the camera. And when they look a little under the camera, it actually looks like they're looking right at the folks in the venue. And so it's a little different with screens because of the way that they're shifted down compared to a venue. But the main thing, the biggest trouble you end up with is this audio, because in each one of these theaters, there's audio all around, and it has getting all the audio echo cancellation, everything else to work well. It turns out to be a thing. The other thing that you don't think about until you start doing it is that a theater is really dark when you're watching it. So the person standing up to talk is really dark too. So how do you light them to make that happen? And one of the things that we've done for that is you have some light so it's a little bit lit. It's not fully off. And then we're using the Canon ME200s, or if you really want to go crazy, the ME20s. The ME20s are really expensive, so you got to be really serious about it. But I think that if I was AMC, I would really think about that, only because the ME20s can see literally you can't see your hand in front of you, and it'll be shooting a video. And so it's like 4 million. I think it's like 4 million or 3.5 million ISO. And so you can put very little light into the theater and still have everyone well enough lit that they can have a two-way communication with them. I think that I saw the press release. I think that what they're really focusing this on is the smaller theaters at AMC. It's at 75 to 150 people, and that's those little postage stamp theaters that are on the end, not the main theaters that they're putting in there. So, and I think that AMC could probably dedicate those to them, because the amount of inventory that they have is precipitously dropping. So they have too many screens and not enough content for them. So they can probably dedicate theaters to this without too much trouble, because they don't have enough inventory for the screens that they have. So it's I think it's a good idea. I think and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It would be a good idea, but AMC has just because we have a theater. Robert Redford, the Arts Cinemas, opened it up like 20 years ago. AMC took it over, and now they're closing. At the end of the year, it's going to close out and turn into a bank. And they're doing that right across the country from these small art theaters that they bought, which would have been perfect for these Zoom rooms. So
maybe. I mean, the art theaters are probably not the best ones for what they're doing. And I think that what they're going to end up using is, in a AMC 16, they're going to take one or two of the small theaters that they have at the far end, because on an AMC 16, they probably have 4 large theaters, 8 medium-sized theaters, and 4 postage stamps. Go ahead.
But with these small ones, the small ones usually have a stage attached to them. So if they can do a person on stage and they do the audience.
Oh, you mean the artsy ones? Yeah.
The artsy ones, yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the one advantage that these theaters have is they're soundproofed, because they're usually theater upon theater upon theater, and you got it. Well, yeah, kind of, but you still got it. You still got to mute the sound from the IMAX theater to the regular theater for sure.
Well, I mean, even with the other theaters, AMC's not been 100% on that. If you have Terminator or Avatar next to you, you're in trouble. Like, if you're doing you'll hear the woo, 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 woo. You're right that they are largely good, but they are not soundproof. They don't float these theaters. And so that is a bit of a problem. But I do think a lot of us have looked at these theaters for a decade going, wow, I can do some crazy things with this theater, and so it'll be really interesting to see if they, where they go with that. The interesting thing is to see if Zoom in those theaters finds a way to increase, the amount of bandwidth that they put into the Zoom call, because, when you take a call and you put it on a screen that big, poor Zoom connections show up. I mean, they look a lot softer than on our little screens. So the 1080p is fine. Like, you can totally make 1080p work on a big screen. It's just the quality of those pixels will be the next thing, and any kind of jumping or frame dropping will be a thing. Next question.
But it also works. It also works with the fact that, if they decide to do a cross country, we have an office here, office here, having the Zoom, and maybe they can even do a watch party together, watch the next Marvel movie or something like that with that.
I don't think watching a Marvel movie, what you could do is do a pre-show and do something. IMAX has been doing some of those where you have a pre-show where the actor's talking a little bit and then play a movie. The tricky part there is linking what goes onto the theater screen and then swapping back to what is going to play out to the DCP. Next question.
Next question in from James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As a media producer, how do you travel internationally? I'm ignorant of such experiences. My impressions have only been through the media and want to understand broader cultures, and how could I represent those experiences?
Go ahead, Javier.
When I travel internationally, or even when I go to a new city, I always try to understand the most I can of the place. So I started with the broader picture, that's like the official, like Lonely Planet or like official guides. Then I turn to TripAdvisor or all of those places when you get what tourists go and like what they get out of the place. Then I switch to Google or Yelp or all the places where the locals are leaving the reviews. I like to know where to go and what to expect. And that gives me a broad idea of what should I do. And then when I get there, I start asking people like, not where do you recommend me going? Because that's like they send you to the most fancy or the most extreme different thing they have in the city. But like, where do you like to celebrate? Where do you go when you want comfort food? And then in those places tend to be less touristy, and that where you can speak to people and they don't treat you like a tourist. They start like treating you like an expat or like someone that's living in the city. Because if you understand how it's to live in that city, I think it's when you can start producing things for your own or like whatever. But understanding the culture, and that's my road.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So a couple weeks ago, we just went to Barcelona and then took a cruise and went right down the boot of Italy. And of course, the first week, Barcelona was media production for me, and my wife she was just a champ trying to figure out what to do afterwards. Because usually for me, it's I hit the city, I do the work, I get out. And in this case, we did a little bit more than that, which was great. She uses Reddit a lot because the subreddits are just amazing with the information that we could go. I went to South Korea several times, but then I didn't really experience it until she went to South Korea, because she did all that research and went from there. The other thing is, if you're going for media or doing something, then there's always going to be somebody that you can talk to before that to get the ideas. But if you have to go fresh, I'd say Reddit, because you can also find people that are in the country that might be able to help you and walk you around, be your guide.
Here you go, Jeffrey.
That was
Courtney.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's by the way, what happens is, well, anyway, on the back end, we can give you a little inside baseball. If folks don't keep up, I don't know where I'm at. Like I'm thinking about a bunch of things, and I just look up and go to the next person that's opened. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, a couple of things to think out. It's been a while since I've done a lot of international travel, but if you're a media producer and you're traveling with a bunch of expensive equipment that may not be yours, you want to make sure you have a carnet all arranged so that the equipment can get in and out of different countries without being attached as stuff that requires import duties to be deposited for it, because I've traveled into countries where they want $35,000 worth of import duty to be posted in cash before they will release that equipment. So if you have your international carnets arranged, the other thing to worry about is vaccinations and vaccines, because check the WHO website for vaccine requirements in travel for whatever countries you're traveling to, because if you arrive in a country where they're requiring, let's say, a vaccine for yellow fever, and you don't have that vaccination, which takes several days to take effect or a week to take effect, they will throw you in quarantine and not let you escape until that vaccine has taken hold and you've been vaccinated. So make sure that you're up on all your shots before you travel.
Go, Jeffrey.
One last thing, and that is to the Courtney's thought, visas. And making sure that you have the right visa when you enter into a country, because some will do work visas, some will do regular travel visas, and you could take a step in the wrong direction, and then all of a sudden your visa is no longer good.
Yeah, and there's a little trip that, not that this has ever happened to me, but you'll have a tendency to want to, if you're only going to be there for a week for a job, you have a tendency not to get a business visa. You just have a tendency to just stay tourist visa because you just want to get in, get out. It's the least amount of trouble. Problem with that is you cannot show up with a tourist visa and a carnet. You can't, those two things don't go together. And someone at customs goes, hey, what's going on here? And then you spend 3 hours talking to folks about what you're doing, and then you get through, but it's a big thing. Just in case you're wondering, I've already tested that for you. Again, carnets for the bigger stuff. In smaller countries, you have to worry about that you go into, not smaller countries, but countries that don't use carnets. So like Brazil is a bigger country, but it doesn't do carnets. And so we, quote unquote, we tend to, quote unquote, smuggle the gear in, which means that we just use regular luggage. and get into. And we also rent a lot more from in Brazil. Like, so we'll take in core aspects that we don't think we can find in the country, just in regular Tumi luggage. Turns out to be really good ones. Little carry-ons tend to be really good because they're really light, and then we refit them all. And we usually find that works okay unless they have a big X-ray that they're kind of forcing you into. You'll find certain times are easier than others. Ones that are busy, no one tends to ask. And so you also really want to, if you're doing production, you want a fixer. So we hire fixers in most countries that are there to. They already know the place. They know what the rules are. They know where all the rental houses are. They know what all those things. They can get you a camera or another camera operator or a crew or a whatever. And they're super useful. And they'll also tell you where all the good places are to eat because they live there and they know what production's looking for. So we've got some great fixers around the world that we use pretty regularly for those kinds of things. So those are that's also a good place to go down. The other thing is that my personal stuff fits into a backpack and a carry-on, period. Like, I can go on my carry-on forever. Like, I literally take little Woolite packets that I can wash my clothes in the sink. And I have if you find that if you wash your clothes in the sink and then you roll them up in the towels, squeeze them, unroll them, and then hang them up, they'll be done by the next day. And I go through a lot of towels to wash stuff. So, but the big thing that we do is I have safety days. We get in early and leave late. So you have a day before the show that we get into. And the reason we do that is if anything went wrong, literally for larger events, one team lands with enough time so that when the second team is leaving, 6 hours after the first team landed. And the reason we do that is so that if a case doesn't make it, the second team grabs onto something and brings it with them. And then on the other end, we usually have two people that are on the safety day on the other end of the event. So if archives need to be still uploaded, if there's some other issue that needs to be sorted out, if something didn't get returned on the day of the event, we have an extra day. And so what you do, of course, is you do I'm often that person, and you do everything you can to make sure everything works so that you have a free day in Paris, and you just walk around. And I've had a lot of great extra safety days. But then, about once out of every 4 or 5, you are working that day, fixing something that didn't go right, and it's worth it. Next question.
Jonas Dottel from Stuttgart, Germany. What are the top factors to consider when choosing hardware for live streaming?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So for me, it's size of the event, and then of course how fast you have to set things up. Like, for instance, going to Barcelona. By the way, my Barcelona trip, my luggage did not make it till day 3, and that included all my production gear. And I did have extra gear in my bag to pull off what I was doing. And I did have help from the community at the event that gave me a couple cameras to use too, which was great. But at Barcelona, that was a large event, so I could bring in a higher end piece of equipment. When I'm going to CES, it's got to be small and compact and quickly set up, quick tear down. And if it doesn't live stream, you just got to go with the flow, record, and then I do what's called a delayed live stream. So I'll record it, and then I'll get to a spot where the internet is decent, and then I'll send it to a machine that will live stream it from there.
Yeah, for my stuff, mostly I'm worried about it being rackable. For the most part, like I want everything to go into cases. So we use a lot of racks for that type of thing. Also, it needs to be 110 240 or 110 220, depending on how you have it there, so that I can plug it in anywhere. Generally, I'm looking for NEMA C13 or C14 receptacles so that I can plug it in. It's really, you can get those C13s anywhere in the world with the right plug. So you just go to a hardware store and you buy the plugs you need for your hardware. Obviously, stability. For most of my hardware, I want an FPGA to be the most complicated thing in the app in the piece of hardware. I don't really like to deal with software that's not going right within live streaming. So I will occasionally use a PC for that, or dedicated hardware for things. I don't like hardware to do lots of different things at the same time because it tends, you tend to have overruns where something's taking too much resources and taking it away from something else that I need. Go at Javier.
I think that for live stream also it's very important to be something that's reliable and that's been extremely tested. I when I'm doing things that are like you have different takes, and especially if there's no client that you're gonna edit later, you can test things and try new things. But live stream has to be the thing that has worked 1,000 times and it's gonna work no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was talking to someone about how I approach this, and for me, it's very much I do crazy shows, but I do them very conservatively. So I'm very conservative about everything. I'm not trying to test things with my pipeline. I'm already doing something that probably no one's ever done before, and so I don't need to add more variables that don't need to be there. Next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois. Kyle wants to know, what do you use to edit large SRTs and or ITTs? There are a number of free online options, but most have time limitations.
So what he's asking about, SRT is two different things, which makes it hard. An SRT can be secure, reliable transport for video, but because he's asking for ITTs too, these are different formats to manage captions. So SRT is typically what you would download or upload to YouTube. ITTs tend to be for iTunes, and so they tend to, I believe, if I remember correctly, I haven't dealt with ITTs a lot. A lot of what I deal with is VTTs. VTTs are oftentimes things that we dice up and make part of an HLS package that we're delivering. So you can have a couple of these different formats that you're dealing with there. To edit them, it depends on what you're doing. If you're editing timing or whether you're editing the actual captions themselves. The captions themselves, most of these are just text formats. You can literally open them, just edit them there. Because it's just gonna be a row of text that you can go through. So if you're trying to find something to fix it, it's fine. To edit the timing, that becomes more complicated. So most of these tools have been built into the editing tools. Now, I haven't used Premieres, although I hear that it's pretty good. I don't know. I haven't played with it. There are caption tools that are within Resolve. The best caption tools in an editing package, in an NLE that I've worked with is Final Cut. The team, I don't know what happened internally, but they just decided they were going to spend an enormous amount of resources on making great caption editing tools. And so I really like a lot of times you have 5 or 6 languages, or let's just say you have 6 languages, you can bring those all into Final Cut. They'll all show up as little, they'll show up as tracks, like a video track, just a little shorter. And you can sit there and read time when they're up. You can edit them. You can then export them in lots of different formats. So that's, Final Cut is a great one to do it embedded. Resolve's getting better. I've heard Premiere is good, but I haven't used it. The other thing is the Telestream makes a variety of them. Don't get Mac captions because I don't think they've updated it, and I don't know how long. I used to have a laptop that just sat on some very old version because they were still stuck in 32-bit, and it's really just barely running. But that's what I used to do heavy-duty work on captions, Mac Caption. But I believe that the PC version of it continues to be updated and is better. And Mac Captions may have been updated in the last couple of years. I stopped trying to make it open because it was going so slow. But Telestream has some tools there. And those Telestream's tools plus now Final Cut and a text editor are really what I've used for some pretty large events for captions. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, we all know that Neumann microphones, but has anyone had experience with Neumann headphones or studio monitors? The NDH-20, there's a link to it, looks like an appealing upgrade from the Sennheiser HD300 Pro I have now.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I always say, listen to them, and if you like them, buy them. Neumann, of course, is owned by Sennheiser, so they share intellectual property since 1991. So they may be the same drivers inside those headphones as your Sennheisers. So you don't know, but they may. It might just be marketing differences between the two. They're all manufactured in Germany these days. But listen to them, and if you like them, buy them.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, what Courtney just said. The thing, Douglas, is you can't tell from appearance what something's going to do. It's way too subjective. You need to have personal experience with them. I love the looks of the Neumann speakers also, but I've never heard them, so I wouldn't consider them. So you should probably, unless you can hear them in an environment somewhere where they can give you an A/B comparison between your beloved Sennheisers, I would just let it go.
Next question.
Next question from James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Are there any sonic differences between a 3.5 millimeter and quarter plug?
Go, Jason.
It's a much more solid connection. I wouldn't trust a 3.5 millimeter plug in professional work if I could help it. Anytime you've got better separation, it tends to be a better thing. But of course, it's still non-locking. I would go with XLR if possible.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I got one word for you. Schmutz. You get schmutz is more of a problem on a 3.5 millimeter plug than it is on a 1/4 inch plug, since you've got more, as Jason said, more surface area that corrosion can and schmutz can build up on. Or rather, it can be more.
Courtney, your answer was so much better.
Anyway, watch out for the schmutz, because the 3.5 has less surface area to get dirty.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida asked, who's going to Zoomtopia behind the scenes about full production for hybrid events later today?
A couple of us, I think, are looking at, I have meetings right after this meeting, right after this. So I might try to jump in for a little bit of it, but it looks really good. And they did a lot of great work. And, we all know Sam and the team. So it should be pretty interesting to see. So hopefully a couple of us will jump in and give us a report. Next question.
Jack Cannon from Phoenix, Arizona asked, looking to get a network attack storage with an SFE Plus to work with Mac. I already have a Synology, but I'm looking to expand. Bigger Synology, or is QNAP better? Any other brands to consider?
Go ahead, Jason.
Bigger Synology. QNAP is rife with all sorts of security issues. It just kind of seems to be getting worse. Now, of course, there's no better defense than having a good firewall and what have you with respect to a NAS. But no, Synology.
Yeah, the other one that Doug Ferguson likes a lot is 44 drives, which is really getting a lot larger.
If you want to get much bigger, yeah.
Yeah, he's been really happy with those, but otherwise I would stick with Synology. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asks, what is your criteria for VPN usage for production? I've used them to do bridge hardware and software and even to get around filtering and bandwidth shaping, but I'm always mindful of the overhead.
Yeah, go ahead, Serge.
I use a VPN to connect to RDP machine without exposing the RDP to the external one. The one I prefer is just called Tailscale. It's a small VPN software that is peer-to-peer. So that way it's easy to install and it's not requiring any hardware.
Yeah, and a lot of what we've done with VPNs is to really make sure that we can control all our hardware remotely. So that basically we're using Meraki systems, and a lot of times there'll be a Meraki that's sitting in there, and it is handing off everything. So as soon as you plug the kit in, it immediately is in our network. And once it's in our network, we have control over everything, and we just know what the IPs are for that kit, and they're all 10 dots, and it's just a lot easier for us to work. So we've been pretty happy with using that. I mean, of course, if you're using tons of bandwidth, you have to look at what your stateful limit is, within that. So if it's, you may have access to a gig connection, but your Meraki or Ubiquity or whatever you're using may only be 50 megs a second or 100 megs a second. So you have to pay attention to what those are. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Alex, you mentioned the use of handheld mics in those smaller theaters. Without a dedicated audio engineer, would you use a Dugan to manage the mics?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, it depends how many mics you have. If you have one person with a mic asking questions of the group, then you wouldn't need a Dugan mixer. But if you had 2 aisles and 2 people with 2 mics, plus a host on the stage, now you're starting to think about some technology to give things a hand.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and you might want to have a Dugan in there and a feedback eliminator, because you're probably going to pipe that mic through the PA system as well, so the rest of the theater can hear you ask your questions as well. So you want to have feedback management, and that can be automated to a large degree.
Next question.
Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland asks, Josh, how's the KiloShow preparation coming, and how can I participate?
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, thanks for the question, Roy. I see you're a concerned person for the KiloShow. KiloShow planning and preparation is going fantastic. We have a large group of dedicated individuals that are meeting regularly. In fact, we'll have a meeting today. And the way that you can participate is there are 2 Discord channels that you can participate in. So we have a discussion channel where we're suggesting things to be voting items, and we have a voting item in the Discord thread, actually. That is looks like this. So you can add your little emoticon to say whether you like an idea, you don't like an idea, or there's a little hammer and wrench that means that you're willing to work on something and put something together for us. We've also simplified it too. If you notice, some of them have a little film strip. Those are little self videos that you can submit to us. For example, what is an experience that you've had in office hours or after hours? What does office hours mean to you, or unforgettable experiences that you'd like to tell us about? So we're putting together different segments. The other way that you can participate, if you are asked to be a part of the panel, we're creating various different segments, and we're curating the panel with the appropriate people for those particular segments. Unfortunately, we can't have everyone on the panel, but if you're asked, then join us on the panel. However, we will have an enhanced version for you to participate in chat. Since the panel is limited, we're going to have a special attention to calling out the chat comments so you can participate there. And of course, we're going to have Mukana tags for every one of the segments. So we're looking forward to it. We have a large group of editors. However, the chance to participate in your own self videos is coming to a close. In 3 days, we're going to stop taking in our videos, and our editors are going to get to work. Dave Trotman is heading up our editing crew, and there's several editors that we have lined up to be able to put in some videos. We're going to have 3 different types of media content. We really want to prioritize the conversation. We don't want to sanitize this with a lot of media, although we do have a lot of things that remind us of some very nostalgic things that we've had in the past. And by the way, if you have some contributions, feel free to share those with us in the next few days. But we're going to have some videos with audio that kind of kick off the section. We'll play those inside the sessions themselves. Those are going to be short. We're not going to limit the communication that we have in the question and answer chat. We're also going to have some things that people are making, like time lapses and other things that don't have any audio. We can sort of put them in and play them side by side so we can continue our conversation. And we're going to have a little longer videos that come in between the segments. These are videos that either set up the next section we're going into, or something that we play out that kind of tell us about the section we just had. This will enable us to change out the panel. So we're going to have the appropriate folks that we can for the different sections. So things are going great. There's 3 more days in which you can participate and add some of your suggestions or jump into the discussion thread and tell us what you want to see for our 1000th show.
That's great. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a good show. A lot of work going into it. So really kudos to the team, and can't wait to see it. Can't wait to be part of it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, have any of you noticed a sonic difference between active and passive direct boxes?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, now that you highlighted sonic, I'm not exactly sure. My answer is basically I hate passive boxes. They always fail. They just... I never have good luck with passive boxes. I get active as much as I can with a battery backup with a plug option too. But that's my answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Difference between an active and a passive direct box is they're usually used to take an unbalanced input and create a balanced output. With an active one, it's being done electronically with a balancing circuit in it that requires power. And with a passive unit, it's generally a transformer, like a high-quality Jensen transformer that's doing that. They all add their own sonic differences, and I can't just say, well, this sounds better than the other. But generally, if I'm doing a direct box, I prefer the passive with a high-quality transformer in it. It's just that sound of a high-quality transformer does add a little bit of coloration, but it's a good stuff. Active, it can be all over the place.
Next question.
Next question is for me. Speaking of cinemas hosting Zoom meetings, could we consider finding a donor and trying an office hours version?
I'm sure we could probably figure something out. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, I would think that maybe we should show them how we do it our way and find a place. Our way. And do it and see what the results. Of course, we're promoting hybrid events, so I know how that can go. But I have a local customer that's a large cinema operator that might be a good candidate for trying it out. So if the group wants to do it,
so
I'd
the
like
biggest
to take
challenge with all of this, so talk to the cinema operator that you know, is bandwidth. How do we get bandwidth to the theater? Because in the malls, you can get to the MPO, but getting past that turns out to be like weeks and sometimes months of negotiation. So if you find a theater that has bandwidth, let us know.
Yeah, he does, and it's freestanding. It's not in a mall. It's a freestanding IMAX facility. And I've seen
IMAX?
What?
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk. It'll be fun. All right, next question.
Next question from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Pittsburgh, PA now. Does anyone know what the escape character is for a string in Companion for things like line breaks?
Jason.
Yeah, it's /N, and I'll put a link in Mukana for you.
Man, Tlaloc. Did we miss each other by like a day? Did you just end up there? Because I think yesterday you were in New York or something.
I saw him last week. He is truly everywhere.
Oh man,
I saw him in Wilmington for dinner
there's
a
going
week
to be
ago.
there's Where's Waldo? There's Where's Tlaloc? You know, so I think that I was just in Pittsburgh. We missed each other. But I literally, when I say I was just in Pittsburgh, I was in Pittsburgh yesterday morning. All right. Anyway, next question.
We're ready to go on to second hour.
We just went so fast. All right. I was not paying attention to time. And the reason I wasn't is because something that's worked forever stopped working right now. In fact, it was working before the show. My phone, when I plug my phone in, it usually shows up on the switcher, and it is not. So I'm going to try to figure out how I'm going to show you what I'm going to show you here. Yeah, it was literally, I tested it this morning. It was working fine. And then I plugged it in and to the exact same cable. And my phone is no longer willing to provide video to my switcher. So we'll see. Anyway, so so what we're going to talk about is RealityScan. RealityScan is the new software, relatively new for everybody else, but a new software that is from Epic. You can download it for free. Again, does anyone know whether it's available on Android? I know it's available on iPhone, but I'm not certain if it's available on Android. So
no, I think it's completely closed.
Yeah, so it's available on the iPhone, which is ironic for Epic to only be available on the iPhone. But anyway, what it does is it is a photogrammetry app. So there's two big photogrammetry apps on the iPhone. The first one is Polycam, which I use a lot. And the second one is this RealityScan. And I haven't talked about RealityScan that much because it was in beta for 6 months. So, and I think I'm going to have to kind of do this in small pieces because, again, I was just setting things up before the show, like right before it, and I realized suddenly that it's not working. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find. I took a picture, and there we go. I did have a backup, kind of a backup here, so I'm going to explain how this works here. Let's see. I'll need to use screen share. I'm just warning the folks on the back end here that let's go. All right. So if you see that, this is a RealityScan. This was a quick test that I did for today. So I did this yesterday, and I'll show you the results here in a second. So what you're seeing there is those are all what's cool about RealityScan, and I think that the user interface is really, really nice. So I think that it's a really great user interface, and what it's showing you there is, and I'll show you the model here in a second. But what it's showing you there is a point cloud. And this is where it's green is where it says, I've got plenty of data for those points. Where it's yellow, it's like, and red, it's like, I don't know what's going on over there. So anyway, so it gives you this kind of heat map, so to speak, that's going to allow you to figure that out. And so, and now what it also does is while you're shooting, it's got a little bit of an AR thing built into it. It shows you where your images were. So if you pull back, you'll see where all your images were in relationship to that piece. And so, now you'll notice that it looks kind of cut off. It did grab points all over the room. what you can do is set the area. So once you start shooting, you can say, okay, I only want you to pay attention to this. You can squeeze a box in. That's what I was going to show you, but I'm having a little trouble with my computer. We'll see if we can figure this out quickly. Anyway, but what you can do, what it's going to do there is it's just going to grab that area. It's showing you where all those are all the photos. It has a limit of 200, and I tend to just use 200 photos for everything. Like if I'm going to use something in doing this, then I just do 200 photos. And build that out. And so you have your capture, and it basically you just keep on tapping on it. It had in the earlier beta, it had something auto captured, and Polycam still does that, but it currently is just manual. So you just keep tapping it to make that work. From there, you take this data, you take all of the point cloud there, and you hit go, and it basically sends it to the cloud. So it uploads all those images to the cloud. It then produces a 3D model and gives it back to you. And then usually I publish them on Sketchfab. So I think if you look for like Alex B. Lindsay on Sketchfab, you'll see the results of me fiddling with this up there. And I'll show you some of those in a second here. But that is, basically, and if you have questions, go ahead and raise your questions. I'm going to do the best I can here. Again, I'm kind of flying with one engine here today. I apologize for that. But the interesting thing about it is, and I think that we're going to get more and more out of these, where what I'm doing, and the reason that I shot this, and I've been shooting tests with my ATEM Extreme, and the reason this is a good use case for this. What I'm doing is, I want to have I want to build things like, so for instance, Jeff Francis wanted to have a little thing over his, he downloaded some, or he pointed me towards these little caps that you can put on your fade to black button. And I was not happy with them. So I printed them out, or when I say I printed them out, I sent the link to my son, and my son printed them out because he's become very good with the 3D printer, and I've offset it to him. So the problem is that there's little like hinges that they built here, and they break all the time, or there's just the stuff is breaking. And so I was like, I'm not going to send these to Jeff because I know they're not going to work. And so then it became like, well, I should build one myself. And then the problem came is that I don't have the measurements. I could try to measure it, but what I really want is just a 3D model of my ATEM switcher. Now I have a 3D model that I downloaded from somewhere, Thingiverse or something, of the Mini, but I don't have one of the Extreme. And so the easiest way to start modeling, and I've been using 3D scans, and we used to use a thing called cyberware for objects back in the 90s. I want a point cloud that just says this is the object, and then I'm going to model it all to that point cloud, as opposed to me trying to do a bunch of measurements, and I just fit everything in. And so you want as much accuracy as you can get from the measurement there. And so one of the ways to do that is to just build a 3D model, like use photogrammetry to grab all that data. I very rarely use photogrammetry data for final models. Like, it's not really how I approach things. Not all the time, but usually you're going to want to process them because it's a lot of raw data. Anyway, so what it did is, I'll show you what we did here. Let me find this real quick here. But what I do is I work on that, and I upload it to Sketchfab. It's just because Sketchfab for both Polycam and you can download these models, by the way, if you're watching this. You'll see a couple different models. One of the things you'll see is I'll pull this over so you can see it. I don't think that there's nothing here that is a problem. So this is a couple of test models that I've done, and done in a couple different ways. This is one that I built this is with a much earlier version of the same software that we're talking about today. And I think I don't know when 7 months ago is when I did this. And so you can see that if you take enough photos, you can, of something close up. This is a 3D model, and it's a textured 3D model. And if I can go into a model inspector and show you what's called the matte cap, which is just that's kind of the raw, takes all the textures off so that you can see, but you can see all that. And this is not errata. This is actually that's the roughness of what I'm looking at there. Now you can see some soft areas here that are created. If I grab onto the wireframe, you're going to see a very, it's a very dense wireframe. And a lot of that's probably more than we need, for that. Now, one thing I noticed is that the new beta or the new version and the beta are different. In the beta seemed to be able to do whatever resolution it needed, and the new version seems to be capped at 1 million polygons, which is a little bit of a bummer. I'm sure that they decided that was too heavy or something. So anyway, but you can see literally if we go back to the final render, like this text that's on here, when we go into, if we go into that and then we go to the wireframe, you're going to see that it's there. Like that geometry is, let's go to the matcap. Now you can see where geometry is not quite perfect there, but that can be, you can do a lot of work on that. And that's something that oftentimes has to do with the vertexes. This is the normals. Normals are, so it looks like hair, but what it's really doing is the normals are telling you which direction each polygon is pointed. And you can see that some of them, when they're all pointed in like, lots of different directions, it's either a rough surface or it can be oftentimes a, just that it didn't calculate the normals the way it probably, you can work on realigning those a little bit. So anyway, this is the output from it. Now we can, I can look at, again, this was this is what I did yesterday. This is the one that you just saw a picture of. So here is that picture that you saw there that I was, of all those images that I got, what I ended up with is this. Now, this is something I probably wouldn't remodel, and that's why I use this as a test. This happens to just be sitting on on the ottoman in front of my but what you'll see is that, it just happens to be sitting there, but for those of us who do modeling, wow, would this take a long time to model? So when you do mechanical stuff, you may want to remodel it. This is a case where we may actually we would probably photo model this, and unless we were getting super close, reproducing that by hand would be super painful. Like this would be easy enough, the wooden piece, but all of this non-uniform, and this is where photogrammetry tends to really shine, is in non-uniform complex data, is where you might want to reduce the number of polygons, but you're not going to want to remodel it. Where you tend to want to remodel it is when it's a more mechanical object, because I'll show you here where you have, so this was the ATEM that I was kind of playing with here, and you'll notice that, there we go. So here is the model, and you'll notice as I get close, the geometry is rough. It's not, and I'll show you another example. I used the same camera, my iPhone, for Metashape, and you'll see that the quality is a lot higher. So, but as far as like, I can take my phone out and take a bunch of pictures. The measurements, this is probably enough to model from right now, and it's up there. Of course, some pieces I couldn't see very well. I was just putting this on a little box and modeling it just as a test to see what I would get. But what I probably want to do is make it a little higher to make that work. But literally, I just took a bunch of photos. It guides you on what you want to do, and then you let it upload, and then it ends up on Sketchfab. And it's, I don't know if I have measurements in Sketchfab, but it is, let's see if it does. No, I don't think so. But you'll notice that if we go to matcap, everything's pretty rough, but it is probably all pretty accurately in the right place. So if you're gonna, but this kind of thing is where you want to remodel it. But you're going to use this as a template for you to put that together, as opposed to figuring those things out. You can see that here's the geometry, and the geometry isn't super dense, and that's the problem. And the geometry is it doesn't smartly, at least this app doesn't smartly find the edges and make them work. Now, to put this in perspective, this is 200 photos, and I got this geometry. I also, just as a test last night for this show, I went ahead and took it just while it was sitting on my desk. I took a couple photos of the switcher, and then I threw these. This is just me throwing them in. I took about 38 photos, and I threw them into Metashape. And so Metashape is a desktop-based version, and it's something I've used for a long time. And what you're going to notice here, as I look at this, is just the dense cloud. This isn't actually geometry, but as I get closer, like all of those are points, right? So the geometry that's being generated from the same camera with, is was considerably higher. And one of the reasons for that is that I was able to just use the phone's ability to shoot, and it focused better. The problem with the RealityScan was that it will only focus at a certain distance, and so I couldn't get closer. And because I couldn't get closer, I couldn't get as much data, and I was able to get a lot more data. And what I didn't do on this, which I have to experiment with next, is shoot 48 megapixel, which I'd be really interested in. So I will say I've not used Metashape on my studio before. I've used it on my iMac, my older iMac. Wow, was it fast? This took nothing to get done. I mean, it was just incredibly fast. So if I don't know if I was serious, I think I'd probably still come back. But you can see that that's a lot of geometry there that's being aggregated. Now, where it has trouble are these. You'll notice that it doesn't know where the white is. There's no data. Like if I really wanted to model this, I would spray it with something or something else that gave it some texture. But plain white, it doesn't really know what to do with. It did know what to do with where the text was because it had some stuff, but here it didn't. So if we look at the actual geometry, you'll see it gets rough where it doesn't really understand, what it's looking at. Here. Now I could probably, again, if I'm remodeling it and using this as a template, I'm probably okay. But that's and now the other thing is that you'll notice how much more data is here compared to, so if we go close up here, so you'll see these are just kind of lumps. And that's what I'm getting out of there. And what I'm getting out of Metashape is, considerably, let's see if I can, I don't know what I did with it. Hold on. You can see what was lumps. It really has lots of, so this would be easier for me to place everything precisely, underneath it. So if I was going to get serious about it, I really thought I would do it with the phone. I think that for my little project, you guys will probably see me continue to work through this project over the next couple of weeks as I try to build a relatively good model of this. I mean, I don't really care about the textures. I might still put them in just for fun, but I think it's going to be anyway. So I'm kind of working through building this model out, and I'm going to use probably end up using Metashape for the template to make that actually work. So anyway, but basically that's all you do. What's cool about it is, again, it's not probably as good as something like Metashape, and which is kind of surprising since they're putting it up in the cloud. I'm not really sure. I'm using the same camera. So anyway, the basic process though is very easy and it's free. And you can download it and just take pictures and you'll end up with a 3D model. So I would highly recommend, and I'm hoping that more of us kind of get into photogrammetry. Photogrammetry, even if you're not a 3D artist, it's still great it's really, really great thing to know how to do. So if you're building models, like for instance, if I had someone to work with on this, I would just take that 3D model, send it to someone and say, hey, can you build a model for me from that? And we do that with LiDAR a lot as well. And by the way, in just in case you wonder, we will be talking about LiDAR in the near future. I scanned part of Freeport, Pennsylvania, my hometown. I scanned some corners on it, and we're going to put that up so people can play around with aligning it. And it's got tons of detail. So we'll see, and we'll play with that a little bit. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I noticed on the website that it does work on the iPad and the iPod Touch. So as long as you have iOS 16 or later on there, it should work even on those lower priced units. Doesn't require LiDAR, obviously, to do the job with photogrammetry.
Yeah, it's just using I don't know if it does it. Like Polycam lets you switch back and forth. Do you want to use LiDAR? Do you want to use... And what I find interesting is how long it's taking for us to merge the two technologies together, which is that we're going to take measurements with the LiDAR and take pictures with the camera. And I don't feel like that's what's happening right now. And it seems like an obvious thing to do, but it hasn't happened. But the AR tools for most of these cameras is so good that they only need a little bit of parallax and they immediately can lock the camera in and figure out where it's at. So yeah, they don't need to have the LiDAR there to make it work. Anyway, yeah, I think it's going to be, I'll try it on an iPad too. One frustration I had as well is that it won't export the images, because the reality is that the RealityScan is a great guide for taking the photos. What I would love to do is take the 200 photos that I generated with RealityScan and bring them into Metashape and see what Metashape created, I bet you it would be an incredible model. But it's a great capture system that unfortunately won't export the raw images. It'll show them to me, it just won't send them out, which is a little bit of a bummer. Next question.
Next question from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. What impact do you expect Epic's new RealityScan technology to have on the film and media industries, and how will it change the way content is created and consumed?
It's a great question. I don't think it's going to affect it very much, only because the tools that we use, as I showed you there with Metascan, are much more robust than what this does. I think what this does is really provide game developers, people who are thinking about AR, people who are trying to, who want something that's relatively easy and fast to grab onto. I think it gives them a new tool that they can use that's good prosumer, consumer solution. So I think that's really where it's going to make a difference. I don't think that for most of us that are doing like real photogrammetry for production, we're using higher resolution cameras. We're using more robust. Now, RealityScan has another application called Reality Capture. Epic bought Reality Capture and made RealityScan. So this is a quick little iPhone thing that's really cool. They have a bigger version of it that is a very professional version. I'm not as familiar with it. I've been using Metascan for a decade or over a decade, so it's just what I know. But Reality Capture is something I'd like to jump into and play with because it's free. You only pay for the models you export. And now the other thing about Metashape, if you look at it, it's free too if you don't want to export anything. So if you can download it and just use it in demo mode, you just can't save anything. And so, but you can play with it and learn it without having to invest any money into it. And the Pro version is nice because you can script it. So you can say, I want you to do all these things. So I can just hand it a bunch of photos, come back and have a 3D model with textures on it, without any other bits and pieces. But a lot of us are using, again, it's like in the film world, there was a company called Pixel Gun that now is owned by 2K that basically have 150 cameras, and they take 150 photos of a person at one time. It's all evenly lit, and they do this for like games, like 2K games, and you basically take a whole bunch of have the person stand out there and take pictures, and they have more focused on the face than others. And they're able to capture like almost the skin texture on the person because they're just a bunch of high resolution, these are all SLRs, and they feed all those images back to a server which processes them. Then that gets usually sent to ZBrush, which they clean up any of the errata that you saw in that thing, you paint it out. And that usually then goes to Maya to be rigged, from there. So, and oftentimes, in ZBrush, oftentimes they retopologize it. They change, they kind of rebuild that surface, and so those are kind of the step-by-steps that you see oftentimes with these processes. So anyway, it's a I don't think it's going to affect filmmaking that much, but it's a really cool solution to be able to go grab something, and even just if you want to send it to somebody, like here's something for you to look at, and they can. The other thing you can do that I can't show you now because I can't get my phone to talk to my switcher, but the other thing that they can do is they can when you send it to somebody, you can send a USDZ file to just via text over, from an iPhone, and someone can literally open it and pop it up right in front of them, and it'll be to scale. Like it'll be at scale. So you can say, I have this object, you can take it, is this going to fit into something? I've also taken this kind of stuff. I didn't use this. I used another piece of software. I used Polycam. I had a pipe fitting that I couldn't quite figure out, and I couldn't figure out what to get to. So I literally created a 3D model just by moving it around the pipe. It was like still installed in the garden. I just moved it around, and then I took it to the hardware store and I popped it up on the desk, so the person could see, like we could rotate it around and talk about what it was. Now, the only problem with that was that the hardware store person literally stopped the entire store, had every person come over and look at my phone, and they all had to see this crazy thing that I had done with a pipe, and they were like, this is the future, this is amazing. And so there was like 15 minutes of like chaos that was created by doing it. but they're immediately able to see like, oh, this is this pipe fitting and this is what you got to do. And here's the tools you need. And here's like they immediately knew what to do because I wasn't trying to describe it. Like I got a pipe and I measured it and I don't know whether it's the inner or the outer. They just immediately knew what it was, and so that's the kind of stuff that you're going to be able to do, as you go forward. Next question.
From Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. In addition to reflective surfaces, seems it's harder to scan the black textured surface of a Stream Deck Plus. Do you have tricks to improve my results?
Go ahead, Courtney. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Keep a clicking and it just don't work. I saw a recent video on the Corridor Cruise on a Nerf AI to generate using photogrammetry to create realistic images, and it seems to handle reflective surfaces and a lot of other stuff. It's from NVIDIA, I think, capital N, little e, RF. Have you seen this, and does it solve a lot of these problems for capturing stuff in Unreal Engine that previously was not doable with photogrammetry?
Yeah, and Nerf is not necessarily from NVIDIA. This is a neural radiance fields are what it's doing there, and this is and it processes the images and builds the 3D fields that are there. There is an option to play with Nerf inside of Polycam, which is the other app that I use, and I've just started to play with it, and I haven't gotten far enough down the path, but it should solve a lot of these problems as we move forward. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm sorry to ask a newbie question here because I'm not a modeler by trade, but when you have this photogrammetry going on and this kind of detail and all these polygons versus creating the same element in a modeling program where you can set the model as a primitive and distort it and do all the stuff and then add a texture to it where it's a lot simpler model, where do the two kind of join together as terms of the best tools to use to get there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, where photogrammetry, in my opinion, works really well are non-uniform surfaces that are complex and detailed and up until now, not super reflective. I mean, that's just harder to work with. For things that are really reflective, like just shiny objects, a lot of times what we've done is we spray them with something that is that we can take off or put a bunch of dust on it. So we've sprayed, we've taken, like, for instance, Shona artwork from Zimbabwe, and it's very shiny when it's done. And so what we do is we spray it with a dust that just gives us a surface all over it that we can easily wipe off. So talcum powder, that kind of thing. You can just put it all over it. It'll give you a surface that you can work with. But even then, there's a lot of smooth surfaces, and wherever those smooth surfaces are, there's probably a lot more geometry than what you need. So to your point, Mitchell, what you do is a lot of times we use, if it's got a fair number of uniform surfaces and everything else, we'll try to go back and remodel those so that we get just the surfaces where we need them. Another way to do that is to reduce the geometry. So a lot of times you'll take that geometry and you'll reduce it down to you'll convert some of that geometry to normal maps. So normal maps will, reproduce, and that's a whole nother second hour, so I'm not going to get into texture mapping on this one, but basically they are reproducing the complexity of that surface without the geometry. And they're like a more advanced, it's a very simplified way to say it, but they're a more advanced version of bump maps. So they'll create the appearance of a lot of geometry, and it's used heavily in games. But it's basically perturbing where the normals are. They have a lot more control over where those go. But basically a normal, by the way, as I talk about this, is by the way, I asked Chat GPT what a normal was, because I knew it would come up, and it actually is a pretty good description of it. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was a really good description of a normal. Anyway, Chat GPT is an AI chat tool that you can just ask it open-end questions and it'll just give you answers. And what I find is that even though I know something, if I want it to be succinct, I've been, in the last 5 or 6 days, I've been throwing it in there, and it gives me a more succinct answer than what I would give. So anyway, a normal is a vector that is perpendicular to the surface of a polygon. And all the geometry that we see today, I mean, we can talk about voxels and everything else, but everything we see today is got a polygon in there, and so that normal tells it how to shade it. So if the light is up here and its vector is very different than the normal, it says, oh, don't give it too much light. If it's perfectly aligned with the normal, it says give it a lot of light. And so that's how we light our objects. And so what we can do is lower the geometry and then perturb the normals. And so we have a map that basically points the normals, and even though the polygon is pointed up, we can perturb those normals at the pixel by pixel level to recreate the appearance of geometry that isn't there. I mean, the only time you see that is when you go right edge on, you'll see, well, it's still flat. so you have to be kind of careful of, you still have to have some geometry in there to catch that. So anyway, there's definitely, I'll show you some, let me see if I can find it really quickly here. There are other things that I've done with photogrammetry. This is not with the app that we're talking about right now, but if you cut to my other screen, what you'll see is, and this is for the folks that I think I'm screen sharing, so for the program. But if you cut to the other screen here, what you're going to see is, I'm just waiting for someone to cut to the screen share. Anyway, so what you'll see eventually, hopefully, unless there's some problem, let me know in comms if there's a problem with getting to my screen. There we go. Anyway, this is all. So this is not normal. This would be a great example of something that would be good with normal maps. But everything you see there, all the geometry, that's real geometry. This is from Angkor Wat, and these are all the photos I took. Now I used an old Canon Mark II to do this, but all those images there are all those are all stills. That's where I took pictures to build the map. You can see the stills kind of all there, but you start generating those stills generated that geometry, and so modeling that geometry from scratch, like modeling all of that from scratch, wow, that would take a long time. Like it would take longer to model that than it took me to fly to Cambodia, take the photos and process them and come back, and probably less expensive to just fly there and take the photos. Now, you may want to eventually, if you look at this geometry, and again, this was just a test that I did, but you can see even the ropes are calculated there. You can see the ropes down here that are being calculated in 3D, from those photos. But this is just photos, no model, this, and this is what photogrammetry does exceptionally well. Now, what photogrammetry does not do well, to go back to what we were just talking about, is, wait for it, this, mechanical objects. Mechanical objects, because it doesn't, they need a lot of geometry on edges and not much geometry on the surfaces. And so they become, and also the other thing I knew about Angkor Wat when I did it, if I can find it again, is that there was tons of diffuse, complex surfaces. So all the kind of, all this water damage and everything else on all these surfaces is really good for photogrammetry because it has lots of points of interest that it can grab onto and make work. So that was part of the thing. Yeah. So that's to kind of answer your question. And then what you can do is you can do what we call decimation, which means I'm going to reduce the amount of geometry. And different tools have different abilities of doing decimation. Metashape has its own decimation. ZBrush has it. When I was working on Star Wars, we used one called Rainbow Geomagic that had really good decimation. And so we would build a very complex model and then have it just get rid of. And basically what it does is it looks at the geometry and sees how bent is that geometry. Like, what's the difference literally of how these things are facing. And if that break angle that goes between those surfaces is low enough, if it's close enough, it just merges them together. So that, and if it's far enough, it keeps that data. So that means that on edges that are changing a lot per the surface, it keeps all the geometry on big flat surfaces. It just gets rid of most of it. It just keeps merging it all together. And that's what we call decimation. And so we decimate the geometry to reduce you can oftentimes reduce the complex, it's like a JPEG for 3D, right? So it can get rid of, 90% of the geometry, and oftentimes you can't necessarily see it. Next question.
And the next question is from Richard Bowman in Defiance, Ohio. Can RealityScan do turntable scans, or do you have to move around the object with your device?
I think that it's generally designed to not move around. I mean, it's generally designed to move around the way it's kind of set up. I don't know if you might be able to do turntable. I haven't tried that. The one that I would probably use if I was doing turntable is Qclone, and which I haven't done a ton of because it's got some patterns and I don't have a printer. Like it's got patterns of print underneath it, and I don't have the printer, and so I haven't to orient the camera. But Qclone is another app that you can get for your phone to make that work. You can definitely do that kind of thing with again with something like Metashape, and the key is there are in the pro versions of a lot of these you can put on little basically shapes that are kind of like QR codes that orient the camera, so it keeps on maintaining its orientation, knowing where those shapes are. It goes, oh, I know what that means. And so it can keep on reorienting its assumptions based on that as opposed to using the geometry around it. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, does RealityScan require an iPhone 14 or does it work on older models?
I don't know how far back it goes, but I think it will go back to probably at least a 10. Like it's probably not, I don't think you go something earlier than a 10, but you probably do a 10. Would probably go back to that. Yeah, because it's not using the LiDAR, to make that work. But it may need something that supports a more modern operating system. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the requirements are it has to be able to run iOS 16.0 or later. So it can be an iPad, it can be an iPod, it can be an iPhone earlier, as long as that device can load 16 or later. iOS 16.
And again, what I highly recommend is downloading and playing with it, because I think it's a really important skill for everybody to have, is to be able to start generating geometry. And we're going to talk more about LiDAR. I did finally get a good place to do some tests, and so I've scanned some stuff we're going to make available to everybody. And we're going to do more in photogrammetry. And I've been doing photogrammetry. When I started doing photogrammetry, we literally were hand matching the photos. Like we were like building the primitives, as Mitchell was talking about. And what we would do is we'd look at something that looked like a square, like a building, and we'd put up a primitive of a box, and we'd fit that box in so that we'd figure out the parallax and everything else by hand. And we painstakingly would rebuild entire city blocks and everything else by building reference points from cubes that were known to us, and then building it all out. So the early days of photogrammetry were really very, very basic. And then Paul Debevec really broke through on that in probably the late 90s. I don't know where he works right now. I think he works for Google, but he worked for University of Berkeley for a long time. And Paul really got into hey, if I can identify key features between different images, I can process those and turn it into 3D models. And so his was the first step down that path of doing it with a computer. And we started using things like RealViz had some photogrammetry tools that were then bought by Autodesk, and brought it, their technology was brought in. But Image Modeler was like early, like 2000, 2002, that kind of thing was what we started using. So it's gotten, and we all knew that it was going to take over, but we just didn't know how long it would take. And it's taken a while, but it's pretty amazing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Does it make a difference in the type of camera and whether or not you have things like autofocus turned on or not? And do you have to turn off autofocus to make sure that it's not hunting or when it's gathering pictures, things like that?
Yeah. So in general, you don't want to change your focal length. Absolutely. And in general, you also don't want to change focus. Now, I find that focus is not as important as you oftentimes, what's interesting about it is that an iPhone actually in some ways is better than a big DSLR, specifically because the image size is so much smaller. That's why I haven't had time to do it, but I think on a well-lit environment, a 48 megapixel iPhone image might be better than a 48 megapixel from a DSLR, because the depth of field is way deeper because it's such a much smaller sensor. And so a lot of times what we try to do is you don't want depth of field. So you want to be shooting, if you're shooting with an SLR, not on this app, but if you're shooting with a DSLR, you oftentimes want to be at like f11 to f16, or even f22 if it's bright enough, to make sure that everything is in focus. Then a lot of times the 24 to 70, this Canon 24 to 70 actually will lock. You can actually lock it at 24. And so you can turn it to 24 and pull this little lever, and it'll just lock it in there. That's so it doesn't change by accident. Otherwise, if we're using a variable lens, which a lot of times you want to try to avoid, if you're using a zoom lens, we tape them. We actually tape them so that we can't change it. We find what we want to use, and it's oftentimes a little bit wider. Longer is harder to figure out. It's harder to triangulate a longer lens than a wider lens. And so a lot of times 35 is a really good number, 35-24, even wider can be. You don't want it to distort, but you also want it to be high, and the lens becomes really important, a high quality lens, because every little pixel matters. So the camera, you don't want to change focal length. You want to move around a lot. You want a wider angle lens. You want to get closer and wider. A lot of times, though, you also don't want to go be random. They do pay attention to how the images are named, numbered. And so you want to kind of work from one side to the other. A lot of times the apps do better when they're not kind of randomly going everywhere. At least Metashape does. Now with RealityScan, I think that it may be a little bit more. The big advantage of capturing with an iPhone is that it captures so much metadata. So there's tons of metadata about what it's doing. It's a very known lens. You can't put another lens on. You can't have back focus issues. You can't have all kinds of things that you would have with a regular camera. And so I actually think that, again, I'm going to test it in the next week over I'm going to be testing over the next week with, playing around with 48 megapixel to see if it makes any difference. But the problem right now is what I have to figure out with RealityScan is whether I'm going to get geometry of more than 1 million polygons, for anything. And that's, the 48 megapixels may be less important in that environment. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri asked, do you know if RealityScan works on the iPad as well as it does on the iPhone? And we answered that a little earlier, and the answer is yes. And by the way, we're cutting through these questions pretty quick. If you have questions about this, we'll run to it'll be a short hour right now, so there's plenty of room for you. Next question. Douglas Carmichael asks, can the RealityScan models be imported into Blender?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm going to guess and say that many polygons may crush your computer.
Not anymore. I mean, I think you're right in the old days, but I think that 1 million polygons isn't that many anymore. So if you have a reasonably new computer, now if you have a 2012 or 2014 computer, Mitchell's completely right. 1 million polygons will be very heavy. But nowadays, an iPhone will move around a 2 million polygon object relatively smoothly. So you should be able to bring that in, 1 million polygons. You should be able to bring into Blender. The question, if you start bringing multiple million polygon objects in, you may have trouble. So a lot of times what you want to do is, again, I'm going to be modeling this extreme in Cinema 4D. So for me, I'll bring that in, and then I'll put it as an underlay, and then you just lock it, and then I'll start building things around it and trying to match each piece and making it, putting that together. So, but I think you could probably do exactly the same thing with Blender.
Seems like once you've got one of your buttons on your extreme modeled, you could just start dropping them in. Yeah,
it's not hard. A lot of the stuff is not. One of the reasons I thought this would be a fun little project is that the buttons are there's 2 styles of buttons. There's a handful of interfaces on the back. Things are not as complicated on this device. It looks really complicated, and there's just the texture maps copied pretty often. So it'd be figuring out those texture mapping issues that I probably anyway. So I'm probably going to, and I'm going to try to build as much of it into the geometry as possible. So I'll separate the top of the buttons as their own geometry so that they're all I can just set them to black and then put a texture on top of that. And so a bunch of little things that I'll probably do, and we'll talk more about it as I get a little further on. Next question.
Richard Bowman from Defiance, Ohio wants to know, what are your opinions on Sketchfab going adult only?
I have no idea. I didn't know that Sketchfab went adult only. I think that I don't know what that even means. I've never seen anything that was adult like adult images or whatever on Sketchfab. My guess is it probably has to do with just what people say. The easiest thing to do right now on the internet is to say everything's 14 and older. Just it's 14 or older, or 15 or older, or 18 or older. It has more to do with not having users interacting with each other that are adults and kids, and that's just from a pure protection of your property thing. A lot of people have just found that it'd be easier that way. So they say you should be an adult, and if someone underage uses it, they say, well, you broke the TOS. Like if they use it and something goes wrong, they're like, you broke the TOS because we didn't allow that. I don't know how they'd enforce it, so I don't know what that means. But my guess is it's just from a legal liability perspective, it's easier for them to just say no kids. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael again. Is there any way to reduce the density of the geometry when it is output? I've done a bit of vertex editing as I learned Blender, and I can't imagine having that many vertices to edit.
Yeah, I don't know what Blender does as far what its decimation tools look like. It may have a bunch of decimation tools, so I don't know for sure. But I think that it is it would be interesting. There's lots of decimation. What you're looking for are decimation tools that will reduce the geometry but maintain the edges. And so that's what you want to kind of keep looking for there. And again, I'm going to make this a little bit of a project, and I'll give you guys updates as we go forward on this process. But I think that you're looking for a good decimation tool. Next question.
From Eduardo Augustine in Panama, would you use RealityScan to scan entire rooms to create models for houses?
The inside-out nature of photogrammetry is the harder thing to do. It's not impossible. I don't think I'd really use RealityScan for that. I find that Polycam does that fairly well. And so I've done a fair bit of geometry with Polycam where I just kind of wave my phone around and I get a bunch of geometry that I can use, and it just builds up that geometry really, really nicely. And it gives me I think that for the most part, RealityScan is really designed for objects and not for environments. Polycam, I think, will do a better job with environments, and with all of them, pointing outward is more difficult to do well. Matterport, which I still have in a box that I'll eventually open, is a way to systematize that with and grab it. So the Matterport and Polycam, and then I think it's behind me somewhere over there. I have a BLK 360, which is in the LiDAR world, a relatively inexpensive scanner. And I just set that in the middle of a room, and it's just going to grab everything all in about 5 minutes. And then that's the easiest way to do it. So if you're going to do it I don't do this very often, I would probably use Polycam. If you're going to do it relatively often, I'd probably use the Matterport. And if it's something that you're really doing for business and you really want to grab onto it, I'd probably look at either renting, a BLK 360 or owning one if you can buy one. I bought mine used. I had a friend who owned one that wasn't using it as much as he could have, so he sold it to me to buy something else. And then of course you can get a service. Like I had a theater scanned, and instead it would have cost me a lot to fly out to New York and go to the theater and scan it, and I just hired someone to take a scanner out.
And just so we're clear, what Alex is talking about is about $22,000. So it is inexpensive by those standards.
There's a less expensive Leica that just came out, and I haven't been able to test it against the one that I have. So there's like a $5,000 or $6,000 one. So the Polycam is $7 a month. RealityScan is the Matterport I think there's a subscription, and it's like $150, and then as you go up you can rent them you can rent a Leica the BLK 360 for about $250 a day, $200 to $300 a day. And then the much more capable Faro 350 is probably like $450, $500 a day, but it's like a $60,000 or $35,000 scanner. And then you go up from there to like a ZNF, which is an $80,000 scanner, and that costs more. Next question.
Eric Billings from Washington, D.C. has a question. Have you noticed any increased photogrammetry accuracy with iPhone 14 versus 13?
0. It doesn't seem to make any difference on that front-facing camera. Now, again, what I haven't done that I have to do. Well, it doesn't. I think it's grabbing the 12 megapixel all the time. So I don't think that it is. I don't think that at least RealityScan is grabbing 48 megapixels. So that's my next test, is to do a 48 megapixel capture and see what kind of geometry I get from that. Next question.
Javier Alfaro from Mexico City, Mexico, right here on our panel. How can I get a USDZ file from RealityScan? Can I export USDZ directly, or what would be the recommended workflow?
RealityScan tends to send everything to Sketchfab, and I believe from Sketchfab you can export into USDZ is one of the file formats that it supports. So Sketchfab you can send it out. So that's where I would probably grab onto the USDZ. Polycam will do all those geometry directly. So you can upload to Sketchfab, but you can also just export directly as USDZ out from Polycam. So it will do it on its own. And I've sent many things that way. Like what's cool about Polycam is that again, when someone gets it on the other side and they open it up, it will be to scale. So if they're in a big enough room and you sent them a picture of a room, it'll just sit inside and they can walk around and look at it. And it's kind of a cool experience. It's again, the reason that I want to bring this up is because this is about to be a huge market. Like if you're thinking about like this, the market that's coming for AR, VR, XR, all these things, when Apple eventually turns the gas on, the market will explode. Like it's going to be, and so there's not many times when something is moving so slow into the future that you can just see there's this huge barge and it's just packed with bullion. It's just like tons of gold, is just sitting there in that barge, and it's just going slowly down the thing. And you go, hey, I can run as fast as that barge, and I can get in there, and I can be ready to grab onto some of those gold plates. And this is one of those few moments where we've heard about it for long enough, and Apple is big enough to make it work. And I still believe that there's going to be a market where one of the big markets I think that's going to happen is clip art. And I know this will sound crazy, but I just think that 3D clip art is about to become a really big deal. So think about all the clip art that you use and all the little shapes that you might buy, or you might buy 100 of them for $50 or $20. Most of us that did graphic design, we bought these in the past. Imagine that all being 3D. All of it has to be rebuilt from scratch, and people aren't going to want to pay $150 a model. They're going to want to pay $25 for 10 models. I got, the office stuff. There's some phones and some other things. And so the Turbo Squid model won't really work but the market will be 100 times bigger than it is now. Right now you're talking to 3D artists. The big thing is when Apple, this is my big prediction for you and why we're talking about these things, is that when Apple eventually releases USDZ support in Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, which will all happen at the same time.
Wait.
It will create a arms race, because PowerPoint will have to do it and Google will have to do it, or they'll just be totally left behind. Because one of the big problems we have is we want to put objects into our presentations and we can't get, this object is oriented this way and this is oriented that way. Right now what I do is I take USDZ models that we've built and I throw them into motion and I rotate them to the angle that I want them in for my keynote presentation. And then I do it even in Preview. Preview supports USDZ. And so I can open up a USDZ file, rotate it to where I want it. Then I take a screen capture and I put it into Keynote. And now I have, just that really weird way of doing it has transformed how I put 3D objects into my presentations, because they all now have the same field of view. They all have the same vanishing points. They all have the same, everything kind of fits together. And this is going to get a lot more intense when this happens. And it's just going to be I really believe it's going to be an astronomical gold rush. Go ahead, Courtney.
Don't you think that AI text to art generators are going to have more impact on, elimination of the clip art world than anything else? Don't you think that those can generate much more creative and much more textured and much more beautiful looking images to put in your presentations than finding, clip art and twirling it around to the right angle,
Maybe. And maybe you put a bunch of geometry and they'll figure out how to make it for you. But I think that right now it's still a little bit of I throw something in and hope something comes out the other end, with AI. I mean, I have a full subscription to Midjourney. I use it all day. I just put things, it's like my entertainment. I need a coffee break usually means that I don't use it all day, but I use it every day on Midjourney. And I'm constantly building incredibly interesting images. And I'm figuring out how it works. And I'm starting to do that now in the last week with Chat GPT, because I'm just curious what it can do. I'm just kind of testing the waters there. But I will say it's going to be some time before that happens. And again, it's fine when we're doing generalized ideas for presentations. But what's going to happen pretty soon is that every object, if right now, for instance, I can, it shows up occasionally on Amazon. You'll be looking at something that's a household good, and I'll go, would you like to see that in your house? And you click on the button on the bottom of Amazon, and it just uses AR, and you can literally it'll pop out at scale, and you can move it around and put it, like I was looking for a little TV thing for under my TV, and it's there, lit. like it looks just like it belongs there. Am I more likely to buy that product? Absolutely. Absolutely, because I now know that it works. And there's so many times when something comes in and it's bigger or smaller or something you didn't expect. And like I bought a gift for my daughter, and I thought it was a little Mbira, and I thought it was going to be about this big, and it was really half that size. Like this tiny thing. I was like, I don't even know how you use that. But and those are the things that will go away when you have those objects. But again, I know that one of our members, I won't call him out, he's probably listening, but he can talk about it in the text if he wants. Started building some of the objects that his company makes, right? The mechanical objects that his company makes, and the salespeople all want them. Like because now they can open up an iPad and show them, this is my product, and this is what it looks like, and it sits on a desk, and that's going to be, so for but I think a lot of people are going to want examples of things that they can have there. So yeah. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. What programs could you use images from regularly with digital cameras? For example, a Canon MKIII to create models. If you're using something other than the phone, the two big ones are Reality Capture and Metashape. Reality Capture is free. Metashape costs, there's a monthly, you can get it as a subscription. I think it's $50 a month or something like that. So it's not inexpensive. You can use Metashape in demo mode. So if you want to learn it and find out if you like it better or worse than Reality Scan or Reality Capture, you can use it. I need to get Reality Capture into my thing just so I know how it works. I just haven't had time to learn it. Metashape is so easy because you drag the images in and say, align the photos, create a dense mesh, create a mesh, texture it, and it's like boom, 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 and in the pro version you can just you can put those all into a script and hit go and walk away, and you end up with geometry. So because of that, I tend to use Metashape, for those things. But I think Reality Capture is a lot of people I know love it. So it's those are the two big ones though, and they run on Linux, Windows, Mac. And they will use all of your processing. Like they're very aggressive about using. If you put, I think like a Metashape, if you put 4 GPUs into a PC, Metashape will use all of them to do the processing. So it's, they because that's their bread and butter. And if you ever saw the Mac Pro, there was a Mac Pro demo that Justine Ezerick showed with all of her CPUs at 100%. Like on a new Mac Pro, the big cheese grater that came out, she had one that was loaded, and she's usually all the things up. That's because I sent her some images from India, and you just throw them in, turn it on, and it just lights up the entire Mac Pro because it knows how to use all of the processing. Next question. Next question, James Fosley from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Could you add a known object, 1x3x4 machinist block to then help with scale?
You can. You're going to find that with the phone, scale is going to be pretty accurate. like it was funny. I don't know why, but I imagine I imagine this switcher to be bigger than it actually is. I was thinking it's like 18 inches long. It's not. It's it's a 1 foot 0.2 or something. I guess it's 14 inches long or whatever. But I just couldn't. I kept on thinking that the scan was wrong until I actually pulled out a measuring tape and realized the scan was right and I was wrong. Because I hadn't measured it, but it was just like how I felt about how long it was, but it wasn't. And so I think that you'll find that the scan is pretty accurate. But yeah, absolutely, we use known objects all the time to make sure. Like if we know something's exactly like, I think they even sell them. We have like 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter cubes, and also 1 decimeter by 1 decimeter cubes that I think you can find on Amazon. I know I used to have them because what we would do is those are known measurements, and we would just throw them into the scene when we were doing the scan, and then we knew what the scale was. But you can also do that. Like I have this cutting pad that is 1 inch grid. And so you can very quickly, if you see any part of that grid, you can get the scale pretty quickly too. So there's a lot of things that you can do that will work that way. And that's kind of how the Q clone works, is that it has known things that are underneath it, so it knows what the scale is. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. What are the business models behind this technology besides producing software for it?
That's a good question. So again, what we use it for a lot is one of the things that's happening right now is that, again, there was, I know some of the people on the team at Amazon, or there were on the team that, they're just taking every piece of furniture and digitizing it. And what they're doing is some of them are just building models of it, but it's easier. And as the photogrammetry gets better and as the cleanup gets faster and as the objects get more complex, it's easier to use the photogrammetry to do it. And you just take a bunch of photos and now you're getting, again, it's going to be something that everybody's going to have to do in the next 10 years. It's like we used to say, I remember when we used to say people are going to have to put images in web pages, and they were like, oh, why would you need that? Why would you need a whole bunch of images? And then we were like, then eventually everyone's going to have videos of how their product works. And that took a little longer for people to get around. But you're going to really have a hard time competing in a crowded online market without your stuff in 3D, and so, and being able to be part of that. And so I think that's that. We use it a lot for previs. It's used heavily in filmmaking where you need to build something out. So there's a lot of photogrammetry being done. Again, you look at something like building characters for games like 2K games. That's all photogrammetry. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I see a use to create brochures and operation manuals and documentation for objects and equipment, so that instead of just the PDF that you get a link, a QR code to load the PDF into your phone or something, you get something with a rotatable 3D image of the object so that you can rotate it around, look at all the ports, zoom in on it, look at the detail on the object in a photo would be very helpful. I find that I'm frequently frustrated by brochures and stuff that just show the front of something and don't show all the I/O ports on the back, and you have to dive deep into the operation manual to figure out what the goes intas and goes outas are. And having a 3D model, you could just rotate around and look at all the inputs and look at the labels on them is a lot more interesting and a lot easier to access than tearing through a 30-page manual.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could imagine, going to a historical site, for instance, is one of the things. That's why I was down there in Angkor Wat, is go to a historical site, take all that photogrammetry, which would be really hard to do any measurements for. And here's the interesting thing is photogrammetry is only limited by the resolution of the images and how close you get to them. A LiDAR scan is really good at getting accurate knowledge. So when I'm speccing something out, I want a LiDAR scan. But if I want detail, I want photogrammetry, or I want a mixture of the both managing structured light which is LiDAR, and unstructured light, which is photogrammetry. I can get incredible amounts of detail. So imagine taking all that detail and then making it look like it was built yesterday with all the color and all the other things. Those would be a lot easier to do with photogrammetry. And I think that we're going to be reproducing the past as well, just like what Courtney's doing. And I think that one of the big mistakes Apple made a long time ago was they had this, they created iBooks and books, and then they just tried to compete with, and this is a very classic mistake, which is you don't have initial success, and so you just try to compete with the other people in the same market, but they have a very limited palette to work with, and so you limit your palette as opposed to creating a new market. And what Apple could have done 15 years ago was push that new market, which is, media-rich books, and they tried to show that. And the problem is they went to Pearson and all these, old companies, and they produced what an old company would produce for media-rich content, when what they really need to do was really fund new ideas. And that's something, by the way, Epic does really well. They have this mega grant where they're just funding stuff. They're not worried about you. They're not even worried. Here's a grant. We don't need money back. We don't need to, it's all just like, here, just try it. And that's it's an interesting business model there. So that is the Epic's done a better job at that, of pushing that forward. But I think Apple still sits there where they could be pushing books where, and again, I think what you're going to see is to take what Courtney was talking about and extend it. Imagine sending someone a keynote presentation that they can go through the keynote presentation, and some of it plays video, and some of it's you talking, and some of it is a model. And you can see that model and then just tap on it, and it immediately projects in front of you from your iPad or your iPhone, and you can move around it and look at it. And that could also, through Pages or other things, become a a really 3D guide. And I think that we're getting very close. I mean, I started pitching these 30 years ago, so we've been thinking about it for a long time, but it's been hard to get all the tools in one place. And I think that we are painfully close. Next question.
James Fosline from Minneapolis, Minnesota wants to know, is there a privacy concern when taking photos in our homes with these 3D apps?
Yeah, you got to pay attention to what you're when you're putting up in the cloud. It's not yours, so you'll notice that I'm pretty careful when I take pictures. I'm not showing anything that I don't want to show. But yeah, you have to be careful. The Polycam, I think, processes everything on the phone. I don't think it's actually uploading it, if I remember correctly. It manages it there, so I think it's a little less. But yeah, you should be careful when you're doing those things. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada, asked, have you read the terms and conditions of RealityScan? Being free, I'm wondering if Epic maintains ownership of the models.
I don't know. I actually don't. I haven't been paying much attention to it. Again, I haven't been doing anything that I would consider serious work in it. So I don't know. I haven't been thinking of it that way. So yeah, it could be. But I right now it's uploading to Sketchfab. It's like they don't really want to keep it. They're just trying to help you move through it. But of course, I think they own Sketchfab too. But I think that there's some kind of usage. I know when you put it up on Sketchfab, it says we'll only keep it here if you publish it. So I publish everything. I don't care. I mean, I'm not taking photos of things that I care about. I'm still modeling with Metashape. But this is a really great. I would highly recommend it. Just such a great app that you can and it's free. Polycam is going to give you a demo, and then it's going to cost money. So you have to kind of keep that in mind as well. Last question for the first hour.
And it's from Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri, asking, which program would you use to scan small industrial objects for 3D part reference?
I probably, if I was really doing this and I was serious about it and I was going to do it with photogrammetry, I'd probably use Metashape with the guide tracks, the guide images. And then what you need to do is get a way to suspend that geometry up a bit, so that it's not against the ground. And then what you can do is take it with one camera, and you can even do it with a turntable. And there's a variety of turntable apps that will do this. But what I would recommend, it depends on how many 3D part references you want to build. And so if you're doing lots of those, then what I would do is build an array of cameras that it can all fire at the same time. You put the object in, hit go, and it just fires them all. And then you pull it out again. And then you can build. Again, because Metashape is scriptable, and I think reality capture is as well, is that you can take all of those. They'll just feed into a system that then will process them all and just pump 3D models out. So if you're really in, and now that's going to be rough reference. The person to talk to in our group that would take those and turn them into real mechanical CAD level production is Chris Fritchie. So you can find Chris Fritchie on our Discord. Chris is Rain Man modeler, like Rain Man level modeler. And he's so Chris Fritchie is the one you'd want to talk to about taking things that you might scan. And this is a perfect example of where you might use photogrammetry. Is that you're sitting where you're at in Kansas City, Chris is in Texas. You can be sitting there doing all these photogrammetry and reference models. You can be emailing them to Chris. He would go in and do all the CAD stuff and build it out to a true model that you can use that's going to look good on every edge and doesn't have any rough edges and so on and so forth. And that might be, but his job will be a lot faster with an accurate 3D model that's generated from photogrammetry at fairly high detail is going to make Chris more accurate and much faster and less expensive for you to have him model this. So that'd be something to kind of think of. But he's a good example within our group. And maybe I'll try to talk Chris into some little test project so we can show how that all works. So there you go. All right. That was a good fun second hour. So a reminder that Sam Kakiko is from Zoom is going to be doing behind the scenes, and the link is in the event chat. That starts right now. So definitely think about jumping in. And I believe we also here inside of our and I don't have I got to figure out somewhere I can have announcements. But I believe we have are we doing eCam? Do we know? Does anyone know? No eCam. So we're taking that off. So the Zoom behind the scenes is happening right now. And otherwise, we're going to jump. I want to thank great questions. I was a little concerned we wouldn't get very many questions on the reality scan stuff because I wasn't sure how many people knew about it. I highly recommend checking it out. Great questions. Great to dig into it. And we'll be talking more about this. So my recommendation is to download these tools, play with these tools, think about the questions. At least every month, we're going to talk about photogrammetry. It's that important. So we're going to, and the idea is the best thing for you to do. I was talking to someone about it, and I hadn't really thought about it in this way until now, or until recently. For a million years, we've learned how to do things in one certain way. People say, well, people learn differently. Well, some people are better at learning in the new ways, in the modern ways of text, and imagery. But the way we learned for a million years was that we watched someone who was better at it than we were. Then we tried, and then we asked questions. So that's what we did today. You watched me do a little bit of it, unfortunately not as much as I would have liked to shown you. Then you ask questions, then you go do it, and then you come back and watch and ask questions again. Watch, ask questions, do, watch, ask questions, do, watch, ask questions, do. So when we show you this stuff, my recommendation is now that you've watched a little of it and asked questions, just go do it and fail. Just fail. Ask questions in Discord, and then you'll have a bunch of rich questions the next time we talk about photogrammetry in January to ask more questions because you've done it, because you have real world failure. And when you have a failure, you now have a little hook that's ready to put knowledge into, or onto a little hole that failure created. So go out there and try to use it. I highly recommend it. Anyway, great questions from the producers. Thank you so much, and thanks to our panelists. Can't do this without you. And every day, everyone's showing up here, answering your questions, and then of course, thanks to the great back end team that's constantly making this all work and putting up with me complaining about why haven't you cut to this in this last quarter second? So anyway, killer team, great team. Thanks for your patience with me. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into after hours.
So man, that makes me want to structure some light.
Structure the light. I got to find out where I can put. I'm going to talk to someone about giving us some server space so I can start putting up bigger geometry sets so people can play with it.
Bruh, do you even structure your light?
His light is so unstructured. Oh my God. It's got a lot of detail, but you don't know exactly where everything is.
It's all pixels and no vectors.
I had to roto something recently, and I was like, all those years of having to trace logos comes back as a value. Hours and hours of it. I was like, yes.
I guess
Bezier to the max.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be seeing Angkor Wat for the next 3 days. Oh, there we